Expectations that I have for the clinical is to be able to get feedback after teaching for 2 years, almost 2 full years. I just want to be able to have someone give me feedback, since at our school we get a little bit from administration, but not a ton. So I want to be able to structure my lessons more and have more of a plan than I have in the past, because as someone who's never taught before, I've always kind of been winging it. We don't have a curriculum, so it's just doing my best.
Yeah, and especially with your ELL program being one person
Right.
in the upper school and one person in the elementary school, I think it will be important to be able to have someone come in and just look, an extra set of eyes.
So for my first units, I want to go back to, for the beginner class, I want to start with tenses, starting with grammar, irregular verbs. And for specific lessons, before, I've started with worksheets, which I like using the paper worksheets and seeing how they're progressing, but I also like to use online resources like Quizlet.
Okay.
And planning out a lesson around how they're able to use those verbs, or irregular verbs especially, and be able to work them eventually into stories that they work in groups.
For sure. In the first couple weeks of school, you'll spend a lot of time testing, because
Yes.
for many of your students, they're brand new.
Right.
So how are you planning on using that test data to affect your teaching lessons?
Especially since this is the first time using our new assessment, I'm going to be figuring it out as we go. But a lot of the data from the test give me what the students will be able to do at each level.
Like, what's the advantage of having WIDA instead of you were using the IDEA
Right.
test before?
So WIDA, first of all, is a little more international, which is much better for our school.
Right.
And breaking it down more specifically in each section, so reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and being able to have more of a concrete idea of what a student can do at each level.
And I liked in your presentation to the whole staff of you saying this idea of positively phrasing the learner, of what can they do. And it is such an isolated place. You're working with these students who don't have a lot of skills necessarily yet, but also being an advocate for your students, and things that I've seen you do this week of asking each department for vocabulary that is specific. So it's like, yes, you're scared to use those worksheets, or you're wanting to use those worksheets, but you're also, I think, being much more holistic, which is going to be so important for those kids, especially when you're looking at the surveys you gave last year of what does it feel like to be in the classroom, because that's your goal. You're getting those kids to our mainstream classes.
Right.
How do you do that quickly and sort of seamlessly?
Right.
Which I think you're making those steps to do it.
And it's going to be a huge learning curve.
And I think educating the staff of even saying to them the steps of what does it mean to be fluent in a language when you have a teacher who's used to teaching chemistry and that they see the ELL program teaching animals or food.
Right.
And you made that really clear of, if they don't have the social language, we can't get them to the technical.
Yeah.
So those are things that you're already doing that I think are really good.
And I think continuing to work with the staff, doing my clinical testing, doing everything, it's going to be a huge challenge, but it's going to be, I think it's, for our school in the long run, it's going to be very good.
And I would say personally that's one of your strengths. I know you don't feel confident in the teaching realm in the sense that you haven't been formally trained, but you are a very inclusive person, meaning that you're an advocate for those kids and people really hear what you're saying, which I think is so big.
It makes it easier for me to communicate with the staff
Absolutely.
in a
And you
more
already
comfortable
have
way.
that. So you're learning new strategies and techniques for teaching.
Right.
But you already have some really important
Right.
skills.
And I wanted to ask specifically about how you tell your students the first week of school about your expectations and routines of, okay, so these are the rules for my classroom. How do you establish that? Because that's something in these upcoming weeks I'm going to have to.
And I think something it's different in my role because the students that are in my classroom have the language.
Right.
So I think for you, one of the things that could be really beneficial is to actually take them through the expectations as you go. Right. And showing them and the visual and because if I can stand up here and say what I expect. Right. But it's like almost like you have to get into the routine. If you can, I sometimes really communicate, because I want them engaged and happy learning. And it's like when Rachel at the meeting talking about dress code was saying, let's flip it and make it not so punitive, right? Let's make them want to do this.
Right.
So in your expectations, if you create an environment that they want to learn and conquer this language.
So maybe flipping kind of the rules in a more positive way that if they follow it, it will help them.
And they see it as empowerment, right? That they feel like there's going to be a time. What are your problems with expectations? You've already taught, right? So you know they're going to want to speak in their native language. So how do you get them? How do you hear that? Because can you imagine having to be in that situation? You can have compassion, but how do you get them to want to see that as, if I speak in my native language, what is that doing to my learning? And when is it okay to speak in your native language? If I'm telling so-and-so who just entered, well, she told you to get out a pen. Then that might be helpful.
Yeah, right. And that's a balance that I've always found, because even though I don't speak all the languages that my students do, I know when they're talking about something not school related.
Absolutely. Also, and this is going to be an obstacle, you have to teach verb tenses or certain grammar things, which may not be high interest.
Right, that's the other thing.
And I think if you can make it so that the class is fast moving and it's almost like they don't have time.
So more activities maybe.
Yeah, and that you need them to be interested and engaged.
Okay. Because I wanted to establish, like I said, not the negative rules, but just giving them more of a framework. So when there's a question of how they should behave in class, that they already know.
Right, like as simply as, what do I do if I want to go to the bathroom?
Right, things like that. Which before I did this program, I didn't think about those things. Like, what do I do if the kid wants to go to the nurse?
Every day.
Right. They don't really teach you in teaching programs. It's kind of like you figure it out once you're in the classroom.
And I also think in this school, there are certain rules that you have to follow, but it's also very individual.
Yeah, we're able to be
independent. So you have to decide what works for you.
Okay. And I think that's good for now.
Are you ready for the first day? You're getting there.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
So you will test on what periods? Will you not meet with your classes yet, or you will?
I'm going to do the first 7 periods once of introductions and just what the year is going to be like, and then I'm going to jump right into testing, because I think they said that they're going to bring someone in to help me with that.
Okay, so that's a logistical thing too, because you're starting your class, and then it's like, well, we're not really going to get into it until so that's a challenge.
And I don't know how long it's going to take, because this is the first time doing this assessment. in
and
the
I
first
think
week.
there's something about the routine of them getting into the class, and also the sooner you can get to know them versus them getting to know you and
Right.
trusting you is going to be really key.
So maybe I'll be able to do 2 cycles through of the 7 periods, or like, so that would be the whole week then, right? Maybe the first week I can just do introductions lessons.
Yep.
And then testing
Because
the
then
next
you
2.
can get them a little bit ready. If you go from the first...
Right. Because this is the first time we've done it like this.
Yep.
Because before I pulled them in groups and
you can't forget the social feeling of those kids, especially.
starting right off the bat.
They're definitely in a new country, and
there's a lot of
don't
new
know the
kids,
language.
really new kids this year.